Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and I have just finished watching the 24 hours of Le Mans, and it's the early hours of Wednesday morning, so as you can imagine it's taken me a pretty long time to watch it, although not too long to be fair. I did watch the first 4 hours live, but I had commitments after that, and so I was catching up from that point on. I did watch the entire 24 hours though, or at least had it on in the background whilst I did other things. And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a fantastic 24 hours of Le Mans. And of course we got a shock result. I think everyone and their dog had their money on Toyota dominating this one, because 24 hours is quite a long time to be racing. And Toyota have obviously had a lot of experience over the last few years, whereas teams like Ferrari and Porsche, they were new to it. Or not new to it, but this was the first time they were running hypercars at the 24 hours of Le Mans. And the same goes for Peugeot and Cadillac, I guess. I was not expecting Ferrari to win. It was... I think I have to say this has to be the upset of the year. But I am very happy for them. The first win in half a century, probably long, I think it was 6 decades, so it's been a long time. And on their return to do it is just incredible. And it's not like it was because Toyota had issues. Both the Toyota and Ferrari that were leading did have issues, and of course the other Toyota got damaged in a crash that was not their fault. The other Ferrari also ran into issues and was, I think, it was a handful of laps behind. But the 51, it had its troubles. The number 8 Toyota had its troubles, and at the end of the day, the 51 Ferrari was just faster. And their driver lineup, I mean, Ferrari could have gone all out and got an all-star cast of drivers. Anyone would want to drive a Ferrari at Le Mans for the first time in however long it was. And they stuck with the drivers who have been successful for them in GT racing. James Collado and Alessandro Pierguidi, who have been together for a very long time, I think. It's at least 7-8 years. Probably more. But they stuck with them, put them in the hypercar class, and they've been rewarded with overall success at Le Mans to add to their already massive CVs in Ferraris over the years. And Antonio Giovinazzi, it has to be said, this is a bit of a redemption arc for him. He sort of fell out of Formula 1 and then sort of didn't really do much in Formula E. Resurfaced in the World Endurance Championship as part of Ferrari's efforts. And now he is a Le Mans winner. Actually, it's interesting when you think back to those Sauber days. You had Antonio Giovinazzi stepping in for Pascal Wehrlein for a couple of races when Giovinazzi made his debut, and he has teammates with Marcus Ericsson, and those 3 drivers have now got an Indy 500, a 24 hours of Le Mans, and the other one's leading the Formula E Championship. So don't judge a book by its cover. I've probably called out all these drivers for not being that good, and it's finally come back around and bit me in the ass several times over. If I have to say, the coverage was excellent. And I think it was pretty much just one straight program on Eurosport 2 or whatever. And honestly, throughout it, I have no complaints about the coverage. I think cutting in bits of history here and there breaks up the 24 hours perfectly. I think it's something that would not work in Formula 1, like if it was like lap 10 and they just cut to like a Grand Prix from 10 years ago. It would be annoying. But in 24 hours, it's a lot of time. It mixes it up a bit, and it's interesting. You know, who doesn't love a bit of Le Mans history? We've got the Le Mans Classic coming up in a couple of weeks as well, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to try and watch as much of that as possible. But yeah, so the coverage was excellent. The commentary throughout, and I think quite a few different people did commentary, but it was all pretty good. I don't have complaints about anyone, and that's very impressive for such a long broadcast. Quite a lot of ad breaks, but I guess that's acceptable. And of course I recorded it, so I skipped most of them. The one thing I would say about the coverage this year is this is the last year for the LMP2 class, and they weren't really featured at all. They were there, but we didn't really see much of it. It cut to the leaders every now and again. I mean, if someone crashed, obviously, or had a breakdown. But the LMP2s felt a little bit forgotten this year. And that's a shame. I enjoy the LMP2 racing, but I think if we come to Le Mans next year and it's just hypercars and GT cars, two classes, very different. But I think they are the fields of the future. This hypercar class is incredible. We got racing throughout this 24 hours. There's a hypercar battling another hypercar somewhere, because there's 16 of them on track and they come across each other quite a lot. And the two leaders, two different manufacturers, both finished on the same lap. That's very rare at Le Mans in the modern age. I'm sure it has happened recently, but I can't think of the last time it happened. But I'm not talking like Toyota both finishing on the same lap. I'm talking, Ferrari and Toyota finishing on the same lap. As for the GT class, it was incredible battling throughout and a lot of different leaders, but there was a very high rate of attrition. A lot of cars didn't make it to the finish. In fact, I think less than 10. I think it was a pretty brutal race for the GT cars. Iron Dames ran very well as well, so I'm very proud for them. And it was nice seeing a Porsche, Ferrari, Aston Martin, all of them running at the front of the field. It'd be nice to have a little bit more... What would be the word? I want to see more cars. Like, I think it'd be nice to see like a Lamborghini and a Honda. Like back in the day, you used to get like Morgans and TVRs in this class, and Marcoses and Lister Storms. I'd like to go back to those days where we saw smaller manufacturers entering teams, or at least teams running like less mainstream manufacturers. Like, I actually don't really know many cars that have come out recently, to be honest. If Noble are still around, like if Noble had a car, stick a Noble at Le Mans, it'd be great. But we do have fairly competitive racing in the GT class, and it was nice to see all the manufacturers that were there represented. We also had the Garage 56 NASCAR running. It ran the majority of the race. I think they did have an issue around a 20-hour mark, which is very impressive. It made 20 hours without issue, and it got to the finish. So for, I think it was Jenson Button, Mike Rockenfeller and Jimmy Johnson, great achievement. The car looked great, it sounded great, and actually, honestly, it makes me think it wouldn't be that bad to have like 10, 15 NASCARs in a Le Mans field just to mix it up a bit. Maybe 1 year, just try it, see what happens, or just adapt the rules so that NASCAR can race against GT cars on a fairly sort of level playing field. But back to the front, the hypercars, whilst I have to say Ferrari did amazing, and they were really the story of Le Mans, Cadillac were incredibly impressive as well. Third and fourth, they had the number 3 car, I think. The one with Sebastian Bourdais in it. That had a few issues and still managed to get back up to 4th. Brilliant result for Cadillac, getting on the podium. I actually don't know if they've done that at Le Mans before. They're a big company, so you would presume they have, but it's not a given. So this was a fantastic race for Cadillac. I know the Action Express, Cadillac had a few more issues, had a big crash at the start, never really recovered. But to finish 3rd and 4th, great result. Also, the Glickenhaus team, their 2 cars beat 3 of the Porsches, beat, I think, both Peugeots, and obviously one of the Toyotas didn't finish, so they were ahead of them. Great result for Glickenhaus. Honestly, I know they finished on a podium in 2022, but when you look at the fact that there were 16 top-class hypercar cars on the field, Glickenhaus were always going to be one of the back markers, but they stayed out of trouble for the most part. They got to the end and they were rewarded with 6th and 7th, I think. So for Glickenhaus, I think this was a bigger result than the podium we got last year, because I think when you look at Porsche and Cadillac and Ferrari and Toyota, you presume they're going to finish above the Glickenhauses, maybe Peugeot as well. So for them to finish ahead of so many of their competitors, even though a lot of those ran into trouble, still a great result for Glickenhaus. Peugeot, had their issues again, but I think this is the best we've seen of them. They were running up near the front at one point on merit, but again, just reliability issues. They don't seem to have overall pace. Work needs to be done to make that Peugeot competitive, and it's definitely behind their rivals, but they can take heart in that. This was definitely the best outing for it so far. Hopefully they can take that into the rest of the year. Next year, I think Peugeot might come back with a much more competitive car, be a bit of a threat up the front of the field, which would be nice to see, because I do actually really like the Peugeot. Not a big fan of the Peugeot brand. Their modern cars are hideously ugly, but I do like their hypercar. Porsche, Penske, Porsche, whatever you want to call them. 4 Porsches in this field. You have 3 from Penske and 1 for Team Jota. Team Jota actually looked the quickest during the race, but I think they had 2 crashes. I think one in the hand of Yiffy Yi, and Antonio Felix da Costa had a crash as well. Not good for them. They could have had a really good result here, and it was kind of their fault, or their driver's fault, but they blew it. But the 2 other Porsches ran into issues as well, and so 3 of the 4 Porsches were in the bottom 6. That is terrible. I had high hopes for Porsche, obviously the most successful brand at Le Mans in its history, and they've looked on the pace of at least Ferrari, so I expected them to be up near the front. They weren't. I don't really remember a single point in this race where Porsche looked like they could be in with a chance of victory. And they'll be disappointed that Ferrari are the first team to go out and beat Toyota. It was really bad. And again, it's reliability, and I'm sure they can take the data and everything they've learned and come back much stronger next year. In fact, I would back Porsche next year. I think we could call the 2024 Hours of Le Mans the revenge of Porsche, because this was atrocious and they are definitely capable of much better. Other than that, finally, Toyota, because I guess we can talk about Vanwall. It's nice seeing them there. Obviously Jack Villeneuve has recently stepped aside for someone else, which I'm not entirely surprised by, but it broke down and was never really that competitive anyway, but at least they're trying. So finally, Toyota, as I said, the number 7, it got hit, no fault of their own, but to be honest, they were kind of in a battle in the sort of 3rd or 4th place anyway. They might have finished 3rd if they'd made it to the end. It was all about the number 8. They had their issues, and they did get to the finish in 2nd, but I bet they'll be massively disappointed, because I bet they thought they had another year. Based on the previous rounds of Sebring and Spa, they must have thought they had Le Mans in the bag. And as it's turned out, they did not. And it might push them to be even stronger for the rest of this World Endurance Series, but this is definitely a sign that this hypercar class is going to be ultra tough in the coming years, especially with more manufacturers entering. You've got Lamborghini and BMW and Alpine and God knows who else coming next year. That field is going to be tight. I think you could end up with several battles happening throughout the field between different hypercars, and that's exactly what World Endurance has always needed. For too long, it was one manufacturer turning up and winning, and then going away and another one turning up. So for years we had Audi there, and then Porsche came back, and we had Peugeot there for a bit, and then Toyota turned up and won 5 in a row. What it needed was competition, and it has it in spades now, and it makes the World Endurance Championship incredibly exciting for the future. And I can't wait for the next round, which I think was at Monza. I think that's going to be an amazing battle between Ferrari and Toyota. Maybe Porsche if they get their act together. Cadillac are there as well. Hopefully Peugeot can get a bit closer as well. I'm excited. This is good stuff from the World Endurance Championship, and long may it continue. I can't wait for next year's Le Mans either. I think that's going to be one for the record books. We'll have to see. So with that, my very late thoughts on the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Congratulations to Ferrari for their massive success. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, comment, and have a good one.